Hey everybody, just want to say this is the last part of the Mojave Road adventure and we had a lot of fun. After this video I'm going to have a few more words to say about a couple of things and kind of bring you up to speed on some mods in the Jeep. And so I just want to invite you to hang around after the credits and catch up with me. It was day 4 of the Mojave Road adventure. Camped in Afton Canyon Campground, it was a lazy morning as we took our time preparing to depart. From that end, we'd each take our own separate ways to our homes around the country. But there still remained a few miles of trail to travel, and maybe a side trip or two worth taking. We are right here, and we've got the railroad bridge here. I think this railroad bridge right here
is the railroad bridge.
Has another water ford. I noticed Jack is ready for us this morning with sandals.
Sure, yeah. Good. Thanks, Jack.
We appreciate that.
Did you change your underwear?
And we're just going to follow it. This mostly, as you'll see, is following right in the river.
Yeah, that river, that's pretty neat.
Just follows the river.
That'll be really beautiful.
Okay.
So we'll come right out here on 15, and you can look at this scale here. Let me get it down to where you can see us. There's us. There's the end of the road. That's 8 miles right there.
Oh, okay.
So we don't have very far to go at all.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to day 4 of the Mojave Road adventure. This morning we're leaving the Afton Canyon Campground, and we are headed to the end of the Mojave Road.
This is where it indicates river crossing on my map, right, Mark?
Yes, sir. Did I miss a gate or something?
Yeah, Jack, about where you are, that's supposed to go straight on across the river.
Yeah, there's a buried gate from runoff.
Yeah, this road will wind around and cross the Mojave later. We'll see what that's like.
And I'm crossing the river. It's pretty dry. Now we're in the wash. Okay, and Jack, we are back on the blue line where we're supposed to be.
Yeah, it's true. We've joined back up.
Boy, isn't there some pretty scenery down in here?
Yeah, this is a really beautiful wash. Nice smooth road, beautiful mountains to look at. I love the green mountains over to the left.
Yeah, there's been so much green on this trip, hasn't there?
Yeah, these recent rains have really been nice.
And as we run up the river here, you'll see that the vegetation is getting less and less. And the BLM has made efforts in the past to try and thin out the non-native tamarisk, which is starting to grow in here.
I'm just amazed out here in the desert at the ground cover and how green all the ground cover is.
And yet, I mean, here we are in the Mojave River wash, and it's dry right here, and it was so wet yesterday. We had to ford that deep part.
Yeah, that's part of what surprises me is that the Mojave River wash is bone dry, but we had that giant lake to go through last night.
Well, that was probably spring-fed then, that section we went through, and we just didn't find the source of the spring.
So we took a little side road off the Mojave River. These mountains were kind of enticing. an open road here, and we thought, let's go up here and see what we got.
Wow, those mountains are great. Look at that, Mom. That's really beautiful. Look at that. Wow. Oh. There's a jackrabbit.
Okay, it may do a right angle jog or something and work its way over there. There's a big jackrabbit on the right there.
Yeah, that jackrabbit was huge.
I don't think too many people have come up this way recently.
Can't believe how beautiful and green this is. Look at this, Mom. This is like, it just turned into like a green meadow. Patch here. If Jack wanted to turn around, he can, or we can press on.
This has been pretty cool. Yeah, I'm fine with turning around.
Just turned around and heading down, but it was quite spectacular up here. So green, and just the view spectacular, really nice.
Kind of been a little bit one of my favorite stretches. I like this little stretch we've been doing today.
This is where we turn for the triangles up here, just a short ways.
We have to go back up in there a ways, so it's going to be around.
Triangles.
One of them you have marked, and then the other one you have marked, and it says the real location in parentheses.
Triangles. There's an Indian site, prehistoric Indian site. It sits atop a little mesa.
It'd be interesting. You wouldn't think maybe primitive peoples would choose this either because of the winds that could come howling up here. But it's also really nice because they're also not going to get washed out up here.
Yeah, but think about it as a lookout.
The look, exactly. There's a couple of really nice.
You can just see the Indians sitting up here watching the wagon.
Here we are at what we think is the triangles. It's an area up here where prehistoric peoples built triangle shapes up at the top of this peak, but we were unsuccessful in determining if we were in the correct location or not, because the triangles we found were very, very well developed, like people had just made them. Come down it. Beautiful.
It's called the Hoover Dam Power Line. In the 1930s, they were used to carry power to the Hoover Dam to help with building it. And now they carry the power back down towards the pumping station, the LA Aqueduct.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, there is Interstate 15 off to the right.
And the end of the Mojave Road adventure for us. It had been a great 4 days of travel across the beautiful wilderness of the Mojave National Preserve. We had a great crew that really enjoyed each other's company. But now it was time to depart. As I drove away, I was reminded of the Jack Kerouac quote. What is that feeling when you're driving away from people and then recede on the plane till you see their specks disappearing? It's the two huge worlds vaulting us, and it's goodbye. But we lean forward to the next crazy venture beneath the skies. Well, the Mojave Road was a great time. We had a really good crew. We worked really well together, and it was just a heck of a lot of fun. And overlanding is a lot of fun, but this one in particular was just a particular joy to travel with the fellows I was with and the ladies and the kids. And that's one of the things I want to talk about a little bit is kids on overlanding trips. We had some pretty young kids on this trip, and one under 2 years of age, in fact. And you may recognize him. That would be Jack's little boy. And he's been on prior trips also, and they've been taking him out ever since, well, almost since he was born, I suppose. He was on a solar eclipse expedition. You might remember seeing him during that. And he was also on the Dollhouse trip, and that was a pretty rugged trip right there. And he was out there having a good time. And what I want to say is, if your kids are keeping you from going overlanding, maybe you need to rethink that. I would just encourage you to rethink that. When Matthew went on the Dollhouse, he saw how Hendrix was, and he says, you know, my kids could do that. He and Haviland had made the decision to not take their kids on that trip. And so they decided to go ahead and take them on this trip. And their boy and their girl, Henley and Denver, they had a ball. And all three of the kids had a lot of fun. And along that lines, I want to recommend a couple of books that are related to this. And the first book is called Last Child in the Woods. It's by Richard Louv. And it talks about something called nature deficit disorder. And it says right here on the top of it, this book is an absolute must-read for parents. That was in the critique that the Boston Globe had printed. And I agree with that. And not just parents, but if you're a teacher and you're not a parent, teachers, if you work with kids at all, scout leaders, you need to read it. You need to read this book. It's a really good book, and a little older, but it has a lot of great information there and perspective on why kids benefit from being in the outdoors. The second book is nothing like that. It's called Bud and Me. And what we have here are two boys from the Oklahoma Territory. This is before statehood. In 1905. One is 5, the other is 9. Their dad is a friend of Teddy Roosevelt. This becomes important throughout the book. He's also the marshal for the Western Territory of Oklahoma. And they go to their dad, living down here in southwestern Oklahoma, and they say, Dad, can we ride our horses to Santa Fe? And yes, that is the one in New Mexico. And so their dad, after a couple of discussions, decides that he'll let them do that. And so they ride by themselves, 5 and 9 years old. Their horses, in 1905, they ride their horses to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and then they ride their horses back. And I'll read you the review here. In 1909, 5-year-old Temple and his 9-year-old brother Bud rode from Frederick, Oklahoma to Santa Fe, New Mexico alone. And that was only the beginning. Before it's all over, they will ride their horses to New York. They will ride a motorcycle to New York. They will drive a car back from New York. They will ride their horses from New York to San Francisco. It's quite an adventure, and it's quite a book, and they're generally by themselves on these trips. So this is just a great read. It's a true story. There are copies of the newspaper clippings and the photographs when they would arrive in towns. They were actually had quite a bit of notoriety when they started this, and so when they would arrive in towns, they were almost always welcomed by the authorities in the town. Great little book. Good book for kids of the right age to read also. It's easily read. The next thing I want to talk about a little bit about is river fording. And I suppose there are some of you out there who are very good observers and notice that during the river ford, when we first arrived there at that deep river ford, the Mojave River, the dirt was dry. But when I started to enter, the dirt was very wet. And I want to explain what happened. That actually wasn't the first time I started to enter. I had started to enter about 5 minutes before that. And a Chevy Suburban coming the other direction barely slowed down and just drove right through the river, and he's what caused all that to come up there. And that was rude because I was preparing to enter the river. He didn't even slow down to see what we were up to. He just assumed that maybe we were too scared to enter or something like that. And so that's fine. I'm going to assume that he was familiar with the river. He knew how deep it was. He knew what the bottom was like. And these were things that we didn't know. And so we were going about it right and checking it out. But still, there's a problem with the way that he did it. And I just want to highlight this. Jeeps, one of the reasons that they can ford rivers up to 30 inches deep is because they have extended breather lines on their differentials. Most vehicles don't even have breathers on their differentials. Their differential is a sealed unit. And the problem with that is the differential gets very hot when you're driving. When you enter the cold river, the air inside the differential collapses. And what happens is, it's not a vacuum, but it's less pressure. And as you enter the river, it sucks the water in past the seals if you don't have those breathers on there. So the standard procedure, no matter how smart you are about a river, before entering the river is you stop and let your differentials cool off for a few minutes. and then you enter the river. And secondly, of course, you go across the river slowly. You don't want to be pushing a big wake all the way up onto the far shore. And that's a dangerous way to do that. So I just would encourage you to, if you're going to be out there river fording, learn how to do it properly, do it safely. You don't want to get out there and have problems. Another thing too is once you're done with the river ford, you want to inspect your all your fluids, your engine oil, your transmission oil, your transfer case fluids, and both your differentials. And you just want to ensure that there's no water contamination. You don't have to do that immediately, but make that fairly quickly after you've done that. And if you find any water contamination, obviously you want to change the fluid in that particular area. The next thing I want to talk about is camera gear. I have some new camera gear. In the past, the drone shots you've seen have been shot with a drone that Ray owns. It's a DJI drone. I don't remember what kind it is. It's one of the bigger ones. I picked up a DJI Mavic 2 Zoom, and this is just a neat little drone. It has an easily removable lens protector over the camera, and instead of having to screw the propellers on, they easily snap on. This unfolds. There's no extra legs or anything to keep it from falling over to attach, and these attach very easily. That's it. It's attached. Just unfold them. Unfold it. I'm not going to do the whole thing. And I can set this on the ground. It's ready to go fly. How long did that take me? A minute? The remote controller for it. This is the remote controller for it. It uses my Pixel 2 phone. Just quickly mounts right into it, and it works very well. So this solves probably the biggest problem with a drone, which has always been used with Ray since it was his drone, and that is the time it takes to set it up. I can have this up and running and have the drone flying in 5 minutes. And before, it would always take Ray and me 10 to 15 minutes before and 10 to 15 minutes after. So a drone shot meant an additional half hour of travel time to get to our destination for the day. And so if we had 2 drone shots, that was an hour lost just setting it up, not including any time that we spent shooting it. And that was the first problem. So that problem has been significantly reduced. The second problem we had was seeing the display in some areas. And I didn't have any problems, and this was out in the desert, and it was bright sunny days, as you saw. I did not have any problem seeing the Pixel 2 phone, although on race we were using a Pixel 2 phone also. So I'm not sure what the difference was. The other thing is, I did pick up what's called DJI goggles, and I can wear these and look like a geek, a real geek. But there's no wires connected up, and I just put this on and it wirelessly connects up to this, and I can see whatever the drone is seeing. So I've got a first-person view through the drone camera in here, and it's real time. It's within fractions of a second that it's appearing in here. So I've got that. I did not use it on this trip because, like I said, I didn't have any trouble seeing the screen, so I was just perfectly happy. And we use the drone primarily in the program modes anyway, the follow me mode, for example. Although I did do a little bit of manual flying of the drone. You could probably tell that because I'm not a very skilled flyer, so when the drone was kind of swooping around a little bit, yeah, that was me controlling it. And I got a nice case. I bought this. It's from a company called Freewell, and it fits all this gear. They make a variety of cases depending on what your gear complement might be, and it's very nice. It is watertight, and they say it will float. As a matter of fact, they demonstrate that it will float. The next piece of camera gear I got is a GoPro Hero 7 Black. This is very nice. I had avoided the GoPro Hero 5 and 6 because I wasn't happy with the audio quality on them. This does a much better job. I don't think it's as good as the Hero 2 because it's still a waterproof device that you can't put an open case on to open the microphones up. The microphones are sealed to be waterproof, but it does a much better job. All of the windshield shots were shot with one of these from my Jeep, And Matt also has a Hero 7 that he was using in his Jeep. We had a total of 5 GoPros on this trip, and so we were over GoPro. We were handing them out to people saying, "Hey, point them at something, take some shots." I also got a skeleton housing for this. This isn't from GoPro, and the mount is not from GoPro. The skeleton housing allows me to plug this in. It uses USB-C, and I can plug this into the Jeep power, so this thing is powered on all the time. It accepts voice commands and so on and so forth. And Matt used the voice commands. I was just perfectly happy to use the buttons.
GoPro, stop
recording. It also
recording.
boots up much faster when you've got a situation, if you've got it turned off and you need it. Matter of fact, you can have it on one button record. You turn it on, it starts recording immediately when you turn it on. So, and then the RAM mount is a lot more flexible. If you're familiar with GoPro mounts, they do this, they do this. They don't do this, okay? This is a lot different. This, I can twist this kind of any way that I need it to line up a shot. So this is a very good mount. It does come from RAM mount, and I really recommend this mount. I recommend this little housing right here to hold your GoPro and go ahead and replace the one that comes with it. And this particular one, there are other companies that make them, but this particular one leaves the microphones open so that they can pick up the audio. Some of them actually block off the microphones. And so that's the camera gear that I've picked up lately, and always improving things. And finally, the last thing that I want to talk about are updates on a few of the mods that I've done on my Jeep. And you may recall that the last time I talked about this, I had a speaker that, for the CB radio that was just laying on the passenger seat or between the seats, depending on whatever I had space for it. I have now mounted that up on the overhead rack between the ham radio components. And so that's what you were hearing when you were hearing me receive radio audio over the windshield mounted GoPro. That's what you were hearing, was that speaker. It's a different one than I had on the Trans Am Trail. It's actually one that I purchased a couple of years ago at a ham fest and just never got around to installing. So I finally got around to installing it. The ham radio itself, in case you're curious, has a nice built-in speaker. The next mod I did is, somebody asked me, what have you done with fire extinguishers? Because on the last video I didn't talk about fire extinguishers. And of course I've always carried a fire extinguisher. But it's kind of one of the things you forget about. I had stuffed it under the front driver's seat and it was just laying there. And been there ever since I bought the Jeep. And I wanted to replace it with one of the newer ones. I believe they're Halitron. And my old one was a dry chemical fire extinguisher. And so I have, when this person asked me that, I said, that's a good idea. I need to talk about that, but better yet, I need to take care of my own situation first before I start giving out any advice. And so I have bought 2 Halitron fire extinguishers. They're the small ones. I think they're like 1.5 pounds. And I've got one mounted by the front driver's seat on a special mount from Drake. Pull up a pin and the fire extinguisher comes right out. There's no Velcro to loosen up. There's no stretchy straps that over years will start to stretch too far and won't hold it securely. It's very securely mounted. And then they sell a kit, they being Drake. Drake sells a kit that you can use to attach all that together. And basically it's just some hose clamps, big hose clamps. And it's kind of pricey. I think it's like $20. I think I spent like $3 for hose clamps at the local big box store, and I just trimmed them down a little bit so they would fit perfectly, and I used a wire brush on the ends to make sure there were no sharp edges that would cut me if I reached down and grabbed that fire extinguisher. And then I took the second fire extinguisher, same mounting arrangement, kit, and I put it back in the cook area on the roll bar. And so it's accessible back there in the cook area in case I had a fire back in that area back there and happened to be working back there in the kitchen. So speaking of which, you probably noticed that nice lighted area that I had when I was back there in the kitchen area on this trip. That is an LED light strip that I got from Brawley, and I am extremely pleased with it. It puts out a generous amount of light, and because it's not a point source of light, you don't get harsh shadows. It's a strip that is over the whole back of the rear tailgate window. When you lift that up, it's right there just in the perfect spot to shine right down on everything that you're doing back in that area. And it comes with a wiring harness so that you can connect it all up. You can plug it in if you've got one of the models of Jeep that has a power plug back there. You can plug it into that. It has a remote control, so you can control the brightness of it, turn it off and on from remote. I didn't want any of that. I basically cut off all that stuff that they had for that and made up my own wiring harness and just put a lamp cord switch in there. Flip the switch, it turns on. Flip the switch, it turns off. Put a connector in there, so if I pull the hard top off, the connector can let me disconnect it, so that it's not, I don't have to remove some wiring or something like that. It's a very easy mod, and I like it a lot. And it is, by the way, hooked into the power that I had back there for my refrigerator, just in case you're curious. And that about does it. So I think I'm going to probably start doing one of these studio chats, I'm going to call these, after each one of my trips, and just kind of catch things up and give me an opportunity to say a few comments about other things. So if you've got any questions, comments are open on this series of videos, and if you've got any questions, post them in the comments, and maybe next time I'll answer them, or maybe I'll just answer you directly, and next time I'll answer them when I make one of these studio chats. Anyway, y'all have a good day, have fun out there, explore your world.